Good evening, folks. Good evening. Hello, hello. Hi there. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. For those I haven't met, my name's James. I'm one of the organisers of Product Tank London. Quick show of hands. Who's been to a Product Tank before? Ooh, very good. Who's joined us for an event online, through YouTube, something like that? Fantastic. Who has taken a weird route to work this week to get on the Elizabeth line? Yeah, all there. Cool, fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming. We've got a great show for you tonight. Just for those that don't know, Product Tank started in above a pub in London. It was just a way for people to really come and work out what this new product management thing was all about. Some things have changed since then. We're now in countries. Oh God, this isn't going to work. Terrible product. Oh, there you go. Yeah, we're in countries all across the world. You're all on YouTube and all the rest of it, so you can get involved in lots of different ways. What hasn't changed is that this is all about the community. It's all about you guys. So there's loads of different ways you can get involved. You come speak up on stage here. You come curate an event if you like. You can join the Slack channel. You can look at all the fantastic content we've got up there. But please do get involved. Throughout tonight, we're going to have a Slido running, so maybe grab a quick picture of that. If you'd like to ask any questions, vote on questions as we go through. We'll pop it back up again later on, but please do send them in. Also, folks watching us live on YouTube, please get involved in the conversation too. We'd love to hear from you as well. So finally, all I get to do is hand over to Harun, who's put together a fantastic set of speakers. It is very easy to underestimate how much effort goes into putting together 3 speakers of this quality, so please do give him a big hand because he has been working his ass off to get us here. So, Harun, over to you.
I don't know how much I actually deserve that. James was a lot of help. James Mays, who's not here tonight, who's at Mind the Product, actually asked me to do this, and I was like, what? Why are you asking me? I'm not a product guy. I'm not a PM. I'm a sales guy. Is this right? And he was like, no, go and do this, because he knows a bit about like my career and my journey. And effectively, I think the reason why this topic resonates with me is because I've always been in functions that are incredibly product dependent. I think most functions are, right? And we know that. But whether it was in customer success, whether it was in sales engineering, I've always had a really heavy focus on working closely with our product team to make sure that we're elevating the right feedback loops, the right communication, getting the right data to the right people in our teams. So hopefully, this topic resonates with all of you as well. Enough about me. We don't need to hear from me anymore. I want to introduce Hillary. Hillary is epic. She's been leading product teams for over a decade. She's worked across multiple different industries. And at the moment at CBRE, she's leading their global product management function. We had a lovely discussion about the 27 different products that she's currently responsible for. So looking forward to having Hillary.
Thank you very much for the very warm introduction. Good evening. I hope you're all very well. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my journey. As Harun said, I'm currently at CBRE. CBRE is the largest commercial real estate company. We are market leaders. We are very traditional. We've been around a very long time. So as product people, I'm sure you know the type of challenges that we can face. I've spent my career at a number of different companies, a number of different sizes, and a number of companies that are very product-centric and ones that are more up and coming from a product-centric standpoint. So I've kind of pulled together a few examples today that I hope resonates with you. It's such a huge topic. I spent such a long time trying to decide exactly where to kind of pinpoint in, because I think we could talk for 20 hours, not 20 minutes on this topic alone. So, yeah, so To me, really, product management, I think, and I fundamentally believe that no matter what organization you're in, you can be product-centric in your own space, in your own corner, in your own part of the world. And product-centric for me is all about the types of conversations that you have. And those conversations that really lean deeply into the usability, the value, the feasibility, and the viability. You know, if you have all of those four components together, and if you have those four components together in every conversation, like at its core to me, that is product centricity. However, there are so many other factors that are at play. You need customer conversations, you need user conversations. You need to be really clear about all of the problems that you're trying to solve on behalf of those users. That then needs to transfer into what impact, what business outcomes you're trying to achieve. So very quickly, that four parts of a conversation becomes incredibly complex. You're fighting against so many different variables that are part of human behavior. You'll all know Marty Kagan's product versus IT mindset, and I often go to Marty's articles and books and things like that, because I think he's a great writer and he's very succinct, not like me. And really, when I looked at this article, I was like, wow, 2014, and we're still having this conversation. Why have we not gotten further? However, it is incredibly hard. At CBRE, we, of these 10 components, we are trying to work on all 10. I joined and took over my role. I've been at CBRE now for 2.5 years. I got into my current role, which is leading product for our global leasing business and marketing. And when I came in, I took this framework and started assessing where we are as an organization. And the very first thing I did was I looked at our structure. I looked at the number of products within our portfolio, which was 27 when I started, and we had 23 product managers. I was like, the maths don't even add up. So the very first thing I did was look at our organization. But there are so many things that when you're in a large organization that are beyond your control as well. For example, how things are funded. Large organizations are funded on an annual basis with big CapEx processes that start in September and finish in March. And then it starts again very soon thereafter. But what I'm trying to do with my team is really start to anchor in on what is in our control. Like, what are the conversations that we can have? What can we bring to the table? So I've got 4 very quick examples of things that we've been done in certain scenarios recently that I hope you take something away. The first one is, and it sounds really simplistic, is create an environment for your users. I've even reached the point now where if you don't have users to talk to, don't do it. Because what I've learned over my entire career that if you don't have users or if you work with proxies on behalf of users, you're depending on somebody else to try and describe what they think that other person wants. Like, what could possibly go wrong? And when I joined in September, the first thing I got was an Excel spreadsheet with 35 features, red, amber, green, go build. And I was like, great, wonderful. And from this part of the business that was really upcoming, they were really drowning in not having valuable capabilities to help them better themselves in front of customers. We sat down and I was like, well, what do you want to achieve? And they were like, we just want to look good in front of customers. I was like, cool, let's do it. Now, when we took those 35 features and we sat down and we worked through each one on line by line by line, and we talked about feasibility. We talked about viability. Do you have the data to make that work? It's all very well building a capability, but do you have the data to run it? And all of these conversations started to very quickly distill down into a very small subset of 6 that were the most important things for them to get right. And then I said, great, now we need users. We cannot do this without users. And it was like, no, we can participate, we can do this. I was like, if we don't have users, we're going to build the wrong thing, and you're all going to be really angry at the end of it. So we said, okay, let's get some users. And fast forward to the end of March, and what we've got now is a group of partners, like real partners in the business, a group of users that turn up every week, turn up looking at designs, turn up looking at scope, have discussions about the problems, have really leaned into, okay, actually that might not work for the business, or it might work if we do it that way. And what's resulted is something that has a real group of partners that, when we did the first major release in the end of Q1, which I know seems like forever, but in a large organization, it was actually quite fast. And when we got to the end of that, it was such a success. I've seen this gushing outpouring from the users of, this is amazing, our clients love it, our customers love it. And the product manager responsible for all of this, she got to present at the global board in Dallas just recently, a few weeks ago, because it was a real story that everybody was like, wow, like we had such a great partnership, this was amazing. And I think for me, the biggest point to take away from this is user research is a sport. And if the users are not on the field, like there's really no point in playing the game. And proxies will not get you to where you want to be from understanding exactly what to build. The second thing I wanted to talk to you is about problems and really taking the time to dive into the problem and understanding. And in the last company I was with, one of the problems that when I started, I was set out to achieve was go fix the homepage. Why is everything bouncing? Why is everything falling off? Okay, well, it's either your marketing or it's something on the homepage or the follow-on experience. And when I got into it and I really dug into the whole piece, we came back with a whole bunch of hypotheses. We tested with users, and we came back with, here are all the things that will fix, what we believe will fix bounce. Great. So then we went away and did some solution discovery, and we started looking at how we might do it and how we might look. And by the end of this actual problem discovery, the outcome was, we've got to rebuild the website from scratch. And when you really take the time to look into the problem and the depth of the problems that you're trying to solve, as product people, it is, for me, incredibly important that we take the time to really understand it. Because when you start out with a problem you want to explore and you test certain hypotheses, and then when you've done the problem discovery, you then have to go into the solution discovery. And sometimes when you get into the solution discovery, back to our feasibility conversation, it might not be possible. And what came from the end of that was we rebuilt the website. Now, the beauty of having to do that at a startup that was very young, that had just sunk $3 million to build the first version, coming back with that rationale was quite a scary thing. Now, we deployed a number of different tools and we did Full Story that helped with the screen recording. And we were able to rebuild the picture that actually, surprise, surprise, we only needed to build 5%. So whilst coming back to the area around how do you fix bounce, I think the main piece is take the time to really dig in and discover. As product people, and at the core of its product centricity is to really lean into the problems so you can really understand and determine what the best solution is. You've got to make it work as a whole in order to be successful and to deliver value. And the last piece is keep an open mind, because what starts as a problem very quickly could end in a very different place. When I started looking at bounce, I never once thought I'd be coming back with a recommendation to build from scratch. Take a step back and look at value. More recently, we had a problem whereby we had a lot of demand for client reporting. And reporting for us as a commercial real estate and the services that we provide to customers is one of the most important capabilities that we need to be able to do. regularly. As a very traditional organization, many of them are building them from scratch all the time, which is madness. But anyway, and part of that was understanding your demand in terms of your backlog. And really understanding as you look at the different themes within your backlog. And it's not just value in terms of do we get return on investment for a specific feature, but actually look at, if I look back at the last 3 weeks, if I look back at the last 6 months, 12 months, and I've invested a certain capacity or a certain throughput, and if I look at what is future facing, how long am I going to take to clear that backlog if it is important enough? I did an analysis in October around lots of user feedback that we weren't fast enough, which is, always the case. But I said, okay, I'm going to dig in, I'm going to lean into the data. And when I leaned into the data, I could see that what was in our backlog, if we looked at our previous performance, was probably going to take us about 3 years to get delivered, which just was not happening. And not just that, I looked at actually the cost of each piece of what was being delivered. And very quickly realized that as we were scaling as a global business, we needed a much more valuable way of being able to deliver in order to be able to get and achieve what our users needed. So back in November, I said, stop. We need to stop this. This is madness. We started doing a sweep of the market, looking at various different capabilities and technologies. And one of the things we needed was transformation capability from a data standpoint to be able to spit out this beautiful customer report that had all of this data transformation embedded in it. And we went from proof of concept to, we launched yesterday, which was even faster than the last one. I know. But yeah, the product manager who was responsible for this, he was an absolute hero, like going from proof of concept in January all the way through to launching this week. And within a large organization, our vendor security on its own takes about 3 or 4 months. So he did a really, really great job. But for me, I think the key takeaway from this is when you're looking at value, it's not just at a feature level. It's not just at, does this thing that we build return? But over time, you need to be looking from a strategic standpoint at when you're incrementally adjusting a capability, or if the demand for change, are you doing it fast enough? Is it scalable? And often, when you look at it, don't always think about you need to go and build this. That was the mistake that we made. We were building all of these things. And when we took that step back, we actually found a great partner that had all of the capability that we needed, which meant instead of something taking 4 weeks, it takes 4 days, which is a huge difference in terms of value delivery and our capability as a product team. Okay, the last one. Invest in yourself. I am a massive fan of product investment and individual investment. And so much so, I'm always found, well, maybe not always, but quite frequently found, you need to make the time. As product people, we never have time. It just doesn't exist. It evaporates day on day. I get to Thursday and I'm like, what day of the week is it? Because it's just rolled from one day into the next. And what I've found and learned, and I'm trying to instill this wider in the team, is you have to make the time. Investing in yourself and your craft needs to be like your backlog. It needs to be like your discovery. You need to constantly look at all the different dimensions. I signed up for a master's in psychology about 1.5 years ago. I'm kind of in term 3. And I'm starting to have conversations about what am I going to study for my dissertation. And I was chatting to my supervisor. I was like, it has to be product managers. I was like, because I think it'd be just so much fun. But I said to him, I was like, I really want to understand it because I firmly believe it is the hardest job. Because not only have we got a whole bunch of skills to learn that change every year, a technology landscape that changes all the time and moves at so much pace, we have all the human dimensions that we have to learn. And within our organization, we sat down as a leadership team and we looked at what are the core competencies that we want to try and assess all of our team on? And then how do we build both learning pathways, mentoring schemes, external training programs in order to allow people to grow in these areas? When I first took over the team, a lot of people didn't even know what product management was, and kind of a shout out to the product. I sent the whole team through the foundations training. And some of them were like, I know what to do. But however, some of the other team are coming out of it going, oh, I had no idea I was supposed to be doing that. So, invest in your time to understand the different dimensions. And, if you do anything tomorrow, when I come to these things, it was like, I'd always the next day think, if you do anything tomorrow, look at your diary. What percentage of your time are you spending investing in yourself? You're here tonight, so it's check for this week. But if you look back at other weeks, what percentage? All right, very quickly. Talk to your users. So important. To the point of don't do it if you don't have access. Keep an open mind, really deeply lean into the problem and be prepared to come out with something completely different. Don't get attached to a solution or a problem too heavily. Assess value often and really ask yourself, do we build it or do we buy it? Sometimes it's so much better to buy it, integrate, and have a great partner. And finally, create boundaries. Make time. Thank you so much.
Wow. That was awesome. Thank you so much. The thing that really resonated with me, I appreciate all 4 of those lessons, but the one that resonated with me the most was that piece around user feedback and how proxies won't do. I'm a sales manager at Pendo now, but prior to this, I was at a startup called Datarama, which got acquired by Salesforce. And I was in the CS org for quite a bit there. And one thing always sort of got my goat, right? I'd talk to a customer, I'd be there in the office, I'd be like, oh, okay, you're having this problem, great. Let me record it, let me put in a feature request. And then I'd go talk to our PMs and they'd be like, oh, yeah, great. We need to talk to the customer. And I'm like, dude, I told you the problem. I outlined every step. I outlined what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve. You've got your user story, just get with it. Build the damn thing. And they'd always be like, no, I need to talk to the user. And I was like, come on, okay, fine. Let's schedule a meeting. They're just gonna get annoyed. They're gonna tell you the same thing again. And we get to this meeting and they never said the same thing again. And it was always really frustrating. It was like, oh, this is the actual problem. And so, thank you. I really appreciate that. It really pissed me off, actually. It is what it is. So next up, we've got Vasily. Vasily, I had a chat with recently, and this guy has founded more companies and tried to create more products than I've used in my life. He has successfully co-founded a company that grew to 100K in monthly revenue without external funding, so wow, and is now a PM at Go Cardless, one of the UK's largest fintechs. So, please.
One, two, mic check. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and thank you for the intro. Oh yeah, actually I might need this thing, right? Yeah, so I'm here joining you to talk about why your organization, or just any hypothetical organization, is not product-centric. So first, again, a little intro about me, just basically a repetition. I've co-founded one successful and several dreadfully unsuccessful startups, and consulted several early-stage companies about searching for product market fit and other product management stuff. And currently I work as a product manager in Go Cardless. By the way, we're hiring, so yeah, please chime in to request a referral. It's low-key one of the best places to work for as a product manager. Thank you for your attention. All right, so first, before talking about why your organization is not product-centric, I figured I might clarify what does it mean to be product-centric. I went and Googled, and one of the options that I found was that being product-centric is building something regardless of what customers want. That was an option. Or burning most of the company money on engineers, and now you've achieved product centricity. So these are valid hypotheses. I don't know, maybe this is true, but I think it's just not as interesting to discuss this because we don't want to be there as other dimension of product centricity versus project centricity. And to me, being product centric in that sense means focus on impact. So we value goals and outcomes more than projects and plans. We do continuous discovery. Basically, we treat every release as a source of knowledge, as an iteration, and we do continuous user research. We talk to users regularly, every day or every week. And lastly, decentralization. Luckily, it has nothing to do with blockchain. This is about having empowered teams that can go and figure out stuff for themselves over centralized control and micromanagement. So this is the concept of product centricity as I understand it, and I will be talking about it, so if you disagree with me, please don't do it during my presentation. All right, so why is your organization not product-centric? First, you just don't need to be product-centric. Second, you are not ready to sacrifice necessary trade-offs of product centricity. And third, you stop investing in product centricity. This is the answer. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Actually, let me proceed with some real-life examples from my experience. So let's talk about the first one. You don't need to be product-centric. This is the context. So this is one of the startups I worked in. It's called Compensare. If you apply to it with your flight delayed or canceled, it will pay you out 600 euros. So this is just for you to be aware of the context. This is a weird mix of product, tech, legal, operations, and yeah. But this more or less nice website took some time to build. When we were starting out, it was like this. So nothing. And you get to figure out a lot of stuff, which is intimidating and exciting at the same time. So me and my co-founder were thinking, which kinds of people we need to hire? Do they need to be experienced or junior? How much cash do we want to burn? How soon we want to get to profitability? Are these people going to be generalists or very specialized, et cetera, et cetera? So these are basically the questions about company culture and vision. And they're very good questions to argue about. And boy, did we argue hard. But anyway, my hope, by the time I already read some good books about product management and startups, and my hope was that we hire smart people that will figure out things by themselves, and they will grow into empowered teams like branches from a tree, and founders can only focus on high-level strategy stuff and basically decide the direction of the trunk of this tree, to continue the analogy. That was my dream. Unfortunately, I discovered that you need cash to do all of that, and we didn't have it, and we decided to go lean, and we were testing ideas in a lean way, and therefore we decided to go to try to get to profitability very soon. So we didn't spend a lot on the team, and we had to hire junior people, and they required a lot of direction from us. And also, we couldn't afford a lot of engineers, so we had to hire a lot of people that were processing applications manually. And after not a very long time, all the decisions were made by a few leaders. The rest of the team just executing those decisions, endless manual operational processes, and no one in the company doing continuous discovery. So basically, the opposite of what I dreamt about. I dreaded it. I thought we were doomed when I found out we were in this situation. And that was one bad part, and the second bad part was that our competitors were doing all the right things. They were hiring smart people, they were figuring out problems themselves and goals themselves and then solutions to those problems. And these teams were empowered and they were doing a lot of risky bets and experiments and explorations in the market. So, yeah. But also doing that, they were burning millions of dollars of cash per year. Oh yeah, this is me sadly looking at our competitors that are product-centric and growing up so fast, unlike us. But yeah, as I said, they were burning a lot of cash, and they didn't manage to find new sources of revenue fast enough, and they were continuing investing on the same foundation of the same revenue streams that we found together initially, but then they continued investing in growth, in exploration, in risky bets, and the situation more and more was like this Jenga tower, right? Which looks fairly stable. I mean, especially in the bullish startup market, right? But if there was some market minor fluctuation, if something could happen to international flights, but it wouldn't happen, right? Like, people never stop traveling. But they did. And this tower started shaking really fast. And we found ourselves in a far more stable situation. We were way smaller than those competitors, but our revenue per employee was twice as large, and we were profitable. So we just had to downscale some marketing, and et cetera, but those competitors had to completely revert their model to basically the same operational, not product-centric model. And they really risked going bankrupt because they couldn't sustain this cash burn anymore. And that's the lesson, basically. That's an example of an organization not needing to be product-centric, and it's fine. Basically, there was a market where probably at that time there wasn't enough room for innovation, but there also was a lot of risk, and our strategy made sense. I don't mean to say that our strategy was more correct than theirs, but ultimately it all made sense. And I'm actually glad that we went this path, and we were differentiated from our competitors. We were doing things in a different way. So yeah, that was the first example why an organization might not be product-centric. It just doesn't need to be, and it's fine. And yeah, a piece of wisdom for you for this evening, if you need it. In bull markets, my opinion, empowered product model is more likely to succeed, but in bear markets, centralized project model is more likely to survive because it's less risky and cheaper. But we will see in the next couple of years, probably. So let's get to the second part. You don't sacrifice trade-offs that you have to sacrifice to be product-centric. A year ago, I was working with a startup in San Francisco that was working with solopreneurs in mental health area. So this is basically like two hype things together. It was a very promising area, great opportunities, and when I joined, founders wanted to set up continuous delivery, wanted to set up product development that's driven by strict following target metrics. And so yeah, everything seemed fine, and it was a very great opportunity. The problem was that there was no product market fit. And there was a 3-year-long queue of features planned and committed to release, which is, we already heard that it's huge, right? But it's especially huge for a market, pre-product market fit. And there was no direct communication between teams, and teams were not cross-functional. So engineers and designers and analysts were sitting separately. They couldn't talk to each other directly. They could only talk to each other through their managers. And this communication flow was just horribly long. And it led to horribly long feature releases. Just any minor change would require several months to ship. So this was the situation. Like, to recap, very promising market, very nice ambitions, but organization structure not fit to do that. So we started digging into maybe we could change that. How about this idea? And we discussed this, And what we discovered is that it was actually a sales-centric organization. Salespeople were the largest cost driver of the startup. They were the largest population of the headcount. And they had this habit of promising features to clients and committing to that. Yeah. So you can't build a flexible roadmap around 3 years of promised features and before product market fit. So the situation was that they would promise features, then we would ship those features, then those clients that asked for those features wouldn't use them because there was no product market fit. That was the situation we locked ourselves in. And obviously there was no room for discovery. There's no reason to set up user and continuous discovery if you can't influence roadmap for the next 3 years. And to make this switch, we had to give up this predictability. We had to give up this ensuring and promising to clients. Because when you're exploring, you can't commit to say what you're going to ship very soon, and like with 100% guarantee. And this is the trade-off that you need to be aware of and be ready to make if you want to move closer to product centricity, in my opinion. So we had this conversation with the founders, and they decided not to go there. They just wanted and trusted this model that they built, which makes sense, I think, as well. But also, especially before product market fit, I think it is very risky because it's very hard to find product market fit in an uncertain market without very frequent iteration and getting knowledge. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. We wish them best of the luck. But, yeah, probably will take more time than it could have. So that was an example of an organization that wanted to be product-centric, but wasn't ready to give up something for this, wasn't ready to sacrifice. And the third one will be about stopping investing in product centricity. So this one is a little clickbaity because it's about GoCardless. GoCardless never stopped investing in product centricity because it's the best place to work. But yeah, this is just like a minor, vivid example from life, like of how easy it is to let this slip through the cracks and stop investing and start decreasing your product centricity in the organization. So yeah, GoCardless is a legit product-centric organization. But also what we observe sometimes internally is that there are unmaintained features and orphaned code bases and things that people shipped but then never looked at again, and they're just there. And then some other people would run out of the company and scream, "Who owns this? Who owns this?" And no one owns this, and yeah, it's a sad situation. And we, again, tried to dig into why it happened, what was the reason, how we can prevent this in the future. And what we discovered, well, this is a complicated organization question, but one of the possible drivers that we thought of is project completion emails. So we have this thing in the company where you send an email to the whole company if you kick off or complete a project, and that the last part means you ship something, you release. And this is a great thing. I think this is amazing because, like, I mean, many companies do that, right? So this enforces alignment within the company. This enforces you to have a cutoff, to retrospect, and to get recognition for what you've achieved. It's cool. But the problem was that these teams started being too focused on the release date and the recognition you get after that, and start measuring and thinking about their work in projects, and never motivated after you've released something to look back at it and check whether it actually created impact or not, and iterate on it, because you can't send an email to the whole company saying, "Oh, we fixed that bug there and now it's working," right? This is not a big enough piece of news, at least for some teams. So that's how they were gradually and unnoticeably transitioning to this project-centric model. And yeah, what we thought we could experiment with is impact emails. So you send an email when you've created an impact. Problem with that is that after you've released a feature, it's very possible you have not created any impact at all, or it will take you 2 or 3 months to measure any actual impact in some lagging metrics, or it might be even longer. And this is low predictability, and you're not sure whether you're actually going to be recognized for what you've shipped, right? It's very probable that you've shipped something that you would never want to talk about with your colleagues again. But there is a good part. Good part is that you can send impact update emails. So if you released a thing a year ago, you can send an email a month, 6 months, 12 months after, if it continues generating value for the company. And it's fine. And it's actually cool. So we released a feature that saves X number of hours last year, and it continues saving time to the company up until today. It's actually great to talk about it. And it forces this shift from I worked on something to I impacted something, from output to outcome, from project centricity to product centricity. And yeah, and it forces us, if we release something that didn't work, it forces us to either iterate until it works, has impact, or be brave enough to say, didn't work, we had a hypothesis, it's fine. Now it's not working, we need to deprecate it. And as a result, there are no orphan code bases, no unmaintained features, hopefully. This actually we started very recently, so I'm not sure. Maybe it will be a disaster. I will share probably, hopefully, in a similar setup in several months. But that was an example of how easy it is to drift back to this product-centric model, because, oh, actually, I will talk about it a bit later. Anyway, just wanted to say that becoming product-centric is not a project. It's continuous effort. You can't ever complete it. You have to invest, continue investing, and otherwise you will drift back. All right, so what unites all this story? Why your organization is not product-centric? First story was about not wanting to risk cash flow. Second, not wanting to keep clients in the dark. And third, not wanting to leave recognition up to a chance. And that's all about risk in my mind. So since you are in the product management presentation, I couldn't help but create a hand-drawn chart. Yeah, I drew it myself. And it's about risk and reward. Probably this is a very familiar concept to many of you. There's this line which basically says that usually, especially it's coming from financial markets, if you want to get higher maximum reward, you will have to take on more risk. You can go and put some money on a bank deposit, or you can invest in Bitcoin. And yeah, you deal with the risk-reward different ratios in both scenarios. And from my perspective, I could see, and I think that being product-centric is being there. So you are basically taking on more innovation, and you have a higher maximum possible reward that you could get, but also you have to go further down the risk path. And we talk a lot about this y-axis on the left, that like, yeah, let's all be product-centric, there is reward there, but also we should be talking about this x-axis in the bottom, that you have to take more risk, and sometimes it's not worth it. So your organization is not product-centric because it's there. And sometimes you just need to brace yourself and go there. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. This is the perfect place for you. You don't need to be product-centric. So if you want to go to that path, basically, to increase the risk, first, make sure it's the best strategy for you in that market. Second, be ready to make sacrifices to increase risk, to become more uncertain, decrease predictability, but become more product-centric. And third, continue investing efforts in product centricity, because it's never a project and it never stops. And human mind, it just naturally drifts towards less risk, more predictability, and teams naturally drift towards there unless you make conscious effort to continue taking on more risk with the view to get more reward. That was my message to you. Thank you.
Sweet. That was, Vasily crushed it, and that also made me feel really good. Recently, I've been in what we call North Star planning sessions, right? And this is because we're re-platforming one particular module of our overall product. And I'm there as sort of sales rep because I'm having these customer conversations. I'm a proxy, I know, but you know, I can bring some flavor as to like revenue expectation and what the sales reps are going to think about this. And we're in this North Star planning meeting, and at one stage, our SVP of emerging products starts saying, okay, great, let's draw some diagrams. And I'm like, no, hold on a second. Like, I don't draw. Like, I'll write emails, I'll fill out an order form, but I don't draw. And she forced everybody to do it, so we started drawing these diagrams. And that presentation made me feel really good, because my diagrams look like that chart, right? All of the product managers in the room had like Monets. They had like 30 seconds, and out came this beautiful flowing thing. But thank you, I appreciated that. Next up, we have Hannah. And Hannah is CPO at Domestic in General. She's got a crazy amount of experience, including recently at GoCompare and RAC. Yes, I got it right. I also want to remind you, just before I invite Hannah on, please do jump on to the Slido at some point, put in your polls, your questions. But yeah, let's have a hand for Hannah.
Nice one, thank you. Hello, can you hear me okay? Great. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for struggling out in the beautiful, delightful sunny weather that we've had today, so I really appreciate that. And thank you to the other speakers as well. There's a lot of themes that I think are going to come through in my talk as well, so that's fab. Good to know that we're aligned. So my name's Hannah. I'm Chief Product Officer at Domestic in General. Haven't been there very long. I'm part of a team, actually, that took GoCompare from, I would say, a risk-adverse insurance traditional organization into a product-centric model. And now, kind of, a few of us are essentially doing a similar thing, taking those learnings and applying them to actually quite a similar company at Domestic in General. If you've not heard of them before, they are, I would say, understated as a company. Lot of substance, and we're definitely working on the style part. They have around 13 million paying customers globally, so we're actually pretty big, pretty cool. Biggest in the UK, also in Europe, and scaling in the US at the moment. So it's a cool company, and there's a lot of opportunity. And every time I'm sort of there and like digging into new parts of it, the opportunity is screaming at me. So it's really cool to be there. What I thought I would do when asked to do this talk is try and give a bit of practical advice from my experience. So to that end, I've created my top tips for building product-centric organizations. Top tip number one, and these aren't in any order, by the way, they're just, as they came to me, but I have to say that number one is the most important, so there is a slight order. So number one is to follow the numbers. So what I've learned is how a business reports on itself, measures itself, drives the behavior of the people. That might be a really obvious statement, but if a business is reporting on all of the units sold without any view of how many customers are buying those units, then that drives a certain behavior, and that's a sales organization. So to be customer-centric, truly, you have to be able to report on customer metrics. And not only that, you need to be able to link those customer metrics to financial value, because likely if you are in one of those sales organizations, the people that you need to convince that customer-led and customer thinking is important are, the CFO, the chief commercial officer, those people who are essentially, driving the value in that business at the moment. And it's not good enough to just report on things like NPS, satisfaction. Obviously, those things are hugely important. But you need to be able to link them to financial value. So, for example, identify those customers who are cheaper to serve, identify the customers who are stickier, identify the customers who spend the most with you, and link that to growth, essentially, because you need to be able to prove that happier customers equals higher lifetime value and therefore more money. And I think if you can focus on how people are viewing the business and start to bring in some customer metrics into there, then you're already changing people's behaviors across the organization. So top tip number 2 is to stop saying product-centric and to start saying customer-centric, because when you turn up at an organization and say, "Hi, I'm Hannah, I'm the new chief product officer, and we're all going to be product-led," everybody thinks that you're basically there to take over their world. And obviously, as we know, this isn't about us taking over the world, although that would be really, really lovely. But it's really important to reframe that conversation from being product-led to delivering customer value. So I've been doing a lot of road shows at the moment around the organization, literally entitled, "What is Product?" I'm just making that connection between customer value and product thinking. So top tip number 3 is to identify the change makers in an organization. I mean, often there's a lot of them in a product team, obviously. But the very nature of an organization, the word organization means group of people. So to change that organization, you have to change the people. And I don't mean get rid of those people and replace them with new people. I mean change the behavior of the people who are already in the organization. And that's because you can't do it alone, in the same way that you can't be like, "Oh, this is product-led, we're leading now." Like, no one's a silver bullet. And there are ways to do that. I think, we heard on these themes before that if you're a product leader, try and flatten the structure and remove those layers, because the more people you have to message to, the lower down those change makers are. Really, your job as a leader is to identify those people, empower them, and then your job is then to just move everything else out of their way. The other thing is to find your allies across the organization. So change makers are obviously not just in product teams. Obvious candidates here are marketing teams, operations teams, customer service, basically any other customer-focused team tend to already kind of be thinking in the same way as you, and they're closer to the customers. So identify the change makers across the organization and then really empower them to make the change on your behalf, essentially. Kind of linked to that, top tip number 4, is to find coordination. So I love OKRs. I absolutely love them. I know that they're really hard to write, and I don't think I've ever got one right in writing them, but I think just having them there, whether you've written it in the right way or not, really kind of implicitly changes the outcome. It drives a behavior and aligns people behind it cross-functionally, and I've never found anything else that does it in quite the same way. So if OKRs are too new and trendy for your organization, then I would just call them goals and KPIs and do them anyway, to be honest with you, because they all have the same effect. I think this is the time for, when it comes to finding coordination with those other departments, it's really kind of the time for astute stakeholder management, identifying the themes that the other business areas are, finding to be problems, or finding to be challenges that are aligned with yours, and then building those things together, publicizing those themes, taking the lead in terms of, product loves a roadmap in some cases. But what I find is, particularly in non-customer-centric organizations, everyone's very siloed, and somebody needs to take the lead and say, right, this is what we're working on. So if you can be the first people to do that, then everybody else tends to follow, because you're the one who's actually put the line in the sand. This is what we're doing. And if it's wrong, then someone will soon tell you, but at least you put it out there. Product for me, in terms of this finding coordination, we're a horizontal, we're not a vertical. So probably product and tech in most organizations are one of the only, or certainly in my view, the most important horizontal. So it is our job, essentially, to find that coordination across the organization. Top tip number 5 is to promote transparency. We heard this with your emails about impact and releases, and I think that is what product can do. I certainly found in my early career, and this was with a particular compliance department, if I found that something, if I wasn't getting the right decision that I wanted, I would just sort of block them out and go behind their back and do it anyway. And I had 100% for failure rate, really. So even if I managed to get the thing out the door, it would come back and bite me in the ass at some point. So I learned that you really have to face into those difficult conversations. If people are standing in your way, they often have a good reason to, or they feel threatened by something, and it's your job to find out what that is that's triggering that kind of fear in them, and then to work around that and neutralize that threat. Sharing what you're doing is the most important thing, and we have a real benefit because product is actually really interesting and other people are interested in it. I mean, imagine trying to read a sort of weekly update from a legal team on all the latest contracts they've been working through. It wouldn't quite have the same effect, but certainly, in product, we run experiments and we discover stuff and we design stuff, and this is like all really interesting things, and we work, on a continuous basis. So every week there's something new to say. So I just tell everybody. That's how you create a following. People, you'll find, will start sharing back. And then I think important as well, if you're going to be transparent, is to kind of do what you say. If you're being transparent with what you're planning on doing, then actually doing those things, I think, is important. And that's how you build trust across an organization and get them leaning in to the product-centric way of thinking. So top tip number 6 is to treat organizational change like you would treat a product. You have to share the vision of what a great product organization is and get people bought into it. You then have to break down the problem. Like, it's a big thing to say, right, we're working in this way now, and in the future, we're going to be working this entirely different operating model. But if you can break it down and do it bit by bit, prioritize, obviously, where you think you'll get the most value, deliver value in that small area. It might be a sort of collaboration between marketing and product and operations, maybe, the allies that you have in the organization. And if you can demonstrate value early and then iterate and build on it, you'll soon find you've kind of got the ball rolling, and other people around the organization will be interested and sort of leaning in and being like, oh, how can I be a part of that thing? And top tip number 7, which is actually my final one, which is a bit of a weird and unorthodox number of top tips, but that's how many that came out as, so there you go. I went with it. So top tip number 7 is to be patient and realistic. I think it's so easy to see what other people are doing and think that everyone else has really got it right. In my experience, that's not true. We're all just continuously striving to get there. And as product people, the fact you're even here, like, we want to self-improve, we want to be better. So we're always trying to learn and reading, and we could get frustrated, but really, just remember that rule books are just rule books, and your experience is what means the most. there will always be JFDIs in every situation. In my experience, I found that if you can just make sure that when you're delivering those, because you have to, you go back and make sure you've measured the value. So build the measurement in from the start, and then measure it. And if it works, then that's great, and you can take it and iterate on it. Claim it for your own. If it didn't work, you can always say, "I told you so." So that's always good too. But we all have investors, and they all really care about where their money's spent, and I would as well if I was an investor. So kind of back to point number one around following the numbers, to be able to sort of align the investor needs and where the money's being spent and where the money's coming from with customer needs. I think that's how you kind of build a winning formula. So that's it from me. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks. I'm also recruiting product people at the moment, so I'll fight you for them all. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And it was great to see you all. Thank you.
That was great. So thank you so much, Hannah. I want to call out two things, actually three things. One, it was great to hear a product leader talk about, calling it customer centricity instead of product centricity, because, sales is doing that all the time. We're like, no, just tell them we have it. Tell them we have it. It's fine. We'll ship it. So the level of duplicity there, I really like that. That rang a bell with me. The other part that I think is always my number one thing that I remind myself is that you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And the way you measure something changes your behavior. And this is especially true for me. So I booked my wedding 2 years ago. And so I bought my tuxedo 2 years ago. And my waistline is nothing like it was 2 years ago. But COVID happened. And I have a wedding in a month that I bought a tux for 2 years ago. So every day when I get onto the scales to measure my waistline and make sure I'm going to fit, I realize I'm changing the times. Because I'm like, if I can change the way I measure this, then I'm still hitting my goals, right? So early in the morning, but you've got to measure if you want to manage. I think that's the key takeaway. Cool. So guys, we're going to go into Q&A. So can I please have all of our presenters back onto the stage with me? And I'll pop on the Slido. And I think we're just going to pop down on stage and sit here. Okay, awesome.
You want us to sit on here?
Well, yeah, if you're comfortable with it.
That's fine.
That's cozy.
Cool. So, Hillary, you've all got mics, so I'm going to just space myself. The first question is for you. Gunai has asked, he said, "Hi, I'm curious about the essential product manager training you sent your team to. Can you share what it was called and how to find it?"
Yeah, it was actually part of the Mind the Product groups. If we go onto their website, it's called Foundations in Product Management, and it's 2 half-days online, and it takes you through all of the kind of main pieces of product management, everything from an introduction and what we do, right the way back to how important it is to look at product problems and metrics and everything.
Cool. Thank you very much. All right, so the next one we've got is sort of like a group question, a question to the group. And it's from Thomas, and he asks, what key things do you look for to determine if a team, department, company should be product or project-led? Controversial question.
Does it have a start date and an end date? And if it does, then it's probably a project. If it's more akin to continuous improvement, then it's probably more a product. There's always space for projects, and probably a lot of the things that are projects you wouldn't want to manage as a product person. It might be a change in finance system or something like that just needs to be, one needs to be taken out, another one needs to be put in. So that's going to be a project. Otherwise, I guess if it's continuously delivering some sort of value to a user, then it's more likely to be a product.
Yeah, ask if there's a business case. That's usually the giveaway, because I think I mentioned that, your capital planning will start in September or October, and it will end in kind of February or March once the capital committee has met and everyone goes, yeah, no, cool. But yeah, typically it's kind of annual cycles. It's typically more waterfall from getting your cash, and then you might deliver in a more iterative approach, but that's project-based.
I'd probably add that you can think of some ways to merge this and some different combinations. Like you can kick off and build the roadmap in a product way, but then feed it into professional project managers that will be strictly following the deadlines and timelines and et cetera, et cetera. You will probably have problems after release because it won't be clear whether you need to iterate or not, but that's another story.
Yeah, I see that all the time. I'm selling a product that's primarily deployed on products people buy, and they're always like, oh, we have a transformation project. I'm like, cool, what's the start and end date? And that approach really determines a lot. But Vasily, the next question's for you. So it's, do you enjoy being a PM more than being a founder?
At the moment, definitely, 200%. But I can't say like throughout my lifetime, but at this moment. One of the big problems that I was experiencing was that for 6 years I was reinventing the wheel, I felt so. There was no one to learn from. I didn't know what were the best practices in the industry. We were just making things that were kind of making sense to us. And you feel more and more detached from the world because you have no feedback loop other than revenue of the company, but this is such a noisy metric that maybe you're still doing stupid things. So yeah, now I have a bigger team, people to learn from, people to bounce my ideas against, and way more impact, and a lot of very interesting intricacies around politics, kind of like that. So I can't anymore say I'm the founder, so that's what I say. I need to be actually empathetic to try to understand what people care about and persuade them to do stuff. And this is very interesting to me at the moment. So,
sweet. It's probably less stressful as well, spending someone else's money.
yeah.
Yeah. Sweet. The next question is kind of related to that, right? And it's related to it in the sense that you said you weren't getting any feedback other than the revenue number. And the question here is, what do you do if your organization doesn't know its users very well? Where do you start? Why is it so hard to get people to talk to customers? This person sounds like they're in pain. I feel you.
I think the first thing starts with trust. So somebody in the organization has a relationship with the customer or the user. It sounds like you might be in a sales-driven organization. And it's finding allies and starting to build trust, and do it on a small scale to start off with. And you can start to scale that up as it's more and more successful over time. I think my experience throughout my career of sales, is that, like, tell me, do you think like product people like don't know how to talk to customers?
No. Like
That's not your
my
experience.
favorite sellers are product people because everyone looks at me with like distrust. And I've been telling them something for, weeks, sometimes months. And they're like, really though? And then I just get someone with a different title in the room, right? Like, he works for my company. When we make money, he makes money. But he's got a different title. His title is product manager. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, really? Is that how it is?
Yeah.
No, PMs are like great at talking to customers.
Cool.
Are we even?
We're even. For now.
The next question's actually, guys, did you have a take? I know in terms of like industry, there's quite a difference on stage with us. So what's it like?
In terms of accessing users. So we don't find it that hard, to be honest with you. I mean, we have a lot of end customers. I haven't managed to set up any like specific programs yet in this organization. I've been there a couple of months, but we do a lot of call listening. I spend a few days in the contact center where I'm sort of sat there, and certainly this was useful at the start of my career as well. In my first week, I went and sat in a contact center and listened to the calls all day, and you just don't hear anything better than someone naturally explaining whatever their problem is or what they need help with. So I'd recommend doing that. If you have a contact center, just go and listen. You don't have to ask the customer any questions. If you're a bit shy about that, it's great. You can just hear what they have to say, and they're completely natural. And then in the past, in terms of setting up kind of user listening programs, we use things like, I mean, none of this is rocket science. It's things like usertesting.com, user interviews, which I find really, really beneficial, because that's where you can sort of really delve into, especially if they're not, and I don't mean user interviews like, have a look at this design, what do you think? I mean, just sort of, what's your experience of, so before this I was at Persimmon Homes, what's your experience of buying a new home? Usually it's a bad experience, from what I learned. But really delving into kind of the reasons why, and how someone really thinks and feels in those situations. I think all of that stuff is gold dust, to be honest. You can't build product without knowing what your customer problems are.
I would agree with Hannah, especially in terms of using third parties, contractors, some services. They are surprisingly effective and efficient at this. Some people that are naturally good at finding people to talk to. So that's how it worked always for me. Either third party or within the company, there's suddenly a person, and they just arrive, and next day you have 100 interviews scheduled, and that's it. So I would probably rely on these services as a start before you build out
One
it
little point,
internally.
I think, if it's about access as well to users, you could look for a technology or a product. In the past, I've used like session recording types of tools where you can actually play back their experience online and really start to look at it from a data standpoint. You won't get the why, but it'll help you start to understand a little bit more.
I actually found Zoom was great. So COVID was really good for user interviews and for user testing, because I think you got a lot more people to participate when they were, sat at home and could spare an hour in the day rather than actually having to drag someone into your office or you to go and meet them. So I think we'll continue to do that, user interviews over Zoom.
I can also recommend this little tool called Pendo.
Good point. I also remembered one more thing that we're testing recently is trying to integrate automated scheduling interviews into your product. So you can say something like every 100th user is getting a pop-up that's suggesting to schedule an interview for a minor reward. And that's how you basically ensure that every week you have a slot booked. So.
And if you can't get your engineering team to do that, again, it's called Pendo. But anyway.
Ooh, number 2.
Next up, so I think this is, there are a lot of questions along this theme, right? And the theme is, how do you handle pushback? So, Hillary, to you was with CBRE. Did you hear pushback along the lines of, we can't get in front of customers? How did you change mindsets? More broadly, it was, how do you handle internal stakeholders who push back to changing direction, to changing to a product-centric organization? How do we deal with the pushback we get from the rest of the business, is the question here.
I think for me, it's about building relationships with people, building relationships with, for us, for example, our sales team are brokers. They have the relationships that speak to our customers every day. So it's building the relationships with them and showcasing why it's really important. And I think if you can show the value of how powerful it is to really lean into the user feedback and the value of that and how you're more likely to get it right, the first or second time instead of building something that people have never used. I think for us, we haven't always done user research in the past and we haven't always done it, and hey presto, what happens? It doesn't get used. So bringing that story into it and building relationships to get that access is really helpful, for us at least.
Yeah, I think it's about co-creation. So if your stakeholders feel like they are part of the thing and are solving the problem with you, then they're obviously going to be a whole lot more bought into what you're doing. And so get them in early to conversations, and it's a difficult balance to tread, because obviously you want to own it, but you also want to show that you're taking everything on board and they're all co-creating with you. That's a skill, but I think it is definitely about building relationships, and that's how you get there.
If you can make them think it's their idea.
Exactly that, yeah. Yeah.
I would add that, so building relationships starts with understanding why they push back, right, and empathizing with them. And I found a useful criteria to understand whether you actually understood them or not is if you can pitch persuasively enough their viewpoint to another person, then you've understood it. Otherwise, you need to persuade someone being in this pushback in person shoes that it's a bad idea to go product-centric. Then you've actually understood them and you can have an equal conversation. So.
I love that. I like especially that piece around the persuasive approach of making the argument for them. It's not just in product. Like, one thing we do with every deal is we kill the deal, right? Like, why would CBRE choose not to buy Pendo? Let's list all the reasons. And that approach of being able to, what's called theory of mind, put yourself in their perspective, play those arguments back, makes you more persuasive, better able to understand and account for what you mentioned in your talk, Hannah, about the unknown unknowns. Like, what is the thing they're afraid of that's stopping them from agreeing? Which I think is super powerful. Next question's about development. So a few times throughout, we mentioned making time for the craft. Hillary, specifically, do you have any advice on what this looks for you in practice? What has worked for you in the past, besides mind the product?
I do a lot of reading. I have tons of books. I haven't read them all from start to finish. Every time I think of a problem I want to solve, I Google it. And there's always a product tank talk or something of that nature. And I think building a group of mentors within the product community. Like, I have, over the years, built up people that if I'm having a specific problem, I'll text them or I'll pick up the phone and go, hey, can we grab a coffee or go for a beer and have a conversation. And quite often I've reached out to this community and emailed a couple of people and said, hey, I'm having this problem. Do you know anyone that might have experienced that? I think that's, I find a very powerful way, but for me it's more about making the time, because you can really get swept up in the week to week very easily, and before you know it, you haven't made that time. So how do you build that boundary in on a weekly or monthly basis to make sure you're constantly creating the space to step out of what is quite an intense role, I think.
Protect the time.
Boundaries.
I'm going to follow that advice. My calendar's getting blocked out tomorrow.
Also, internally, you can book meetings with other PMs. I think that's a great thing. You can just, you don't need to wait for an initiative from someone upwards. You can just reach out to someone and say, do you want to chat 30 minutes every week about what you've done this week and get my feedback, and I will share like what I've done and ask for your feedback. And yeah, so far it works great right now in Go Cardless, because you get a different third-party viewpoint, but also with the same mindset and the same knowledge base. And yeah, that's one of the ideas.
Brilliant.
Just one last thing that came to me, sorry, is the do it. Like often the biggest challenge to learning a new skill or expanding or growing is the doing. You know, as humans, you can read books, that's all great, but you learn by doing, and you learn by doing over and over and over again. So how to get over maybe whether it's the fear or what's stopping you trying a new technique or what's stopping you doing facilitation workshops and things like that. So do. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Brilliant. Guys, I think we're going to go 2 more questions. So last 2. The first one here, I'm going to sort of wrap up a couple again, a couple of anonymous and one from Gunai again around OKRs. So we've got, I read that OKRs are only effective in product-led orgs and empowered teams. At which point of the transformation did you introduce them? So there's a question around when do we bring OKRs into the organization? And then another one around how frequently we use them. So it's, do you articulate your hypothesis in OKRs to show you've achieved a particular outcome? If so, do you use it quarterly, yearly? So how do we go about implementing OKRs? Which part of the journey, and sort of like with what frequency?
So definitely within the product team, and that's obviously, you know, everything that we're trying to do is outcome focused. So OKRs just beautifully align to that. And then you can, again, you know, show the way, be leaders in OKRs. When I was at Go Compare, there was an initiative, a project to roll out OKRs across the whole organisation. So everybody got told about OKRs, and they brought in tooling, and they just wanted everybody to do OKRs at the same time. And unsurprisingly, it didn't work, and nobody used the tool because it was all new. And, you know, trying to get, for example, finance team to create OKRs was really very, very difficult because they don't work in the same way as us. So I don't know. I've never worked at Google and places that say that they use OKRs across the whole organisation. But what I find is that certainly within the product team, they're a fantastic tool and they're a fantastic communication tool. And we have had success in sort of joining up product marketing, operations, in using OKRs kind of together, so do collective customer experience OKRs, which then, you know, underneath that, there are some product ones, there are some service ones in operations, and there might be some others as well. So having those kind of, you know, 4 or 5 high level, what as a company are we trying to achieve, that each department can then hang theirs off below, whether you call them OKRs or not, I think is a really great way of coordinating in an organisation. But you're probably not going to get finance and teams like that being able to do them for themselves because they just don't work in that way.
Yes. Actually, I was thinking, if you have, the question was about like organization transition, like if you have a lot of time, like a year or 2 years while you're doing another transition, then you can try to do it organically. You can just try inspiring conversations with people about what they want to achieve, like, and then maybe write it down somewhere, and then in several months go back with them and ask whether they have achieved it, and see how they start arguing with each other, because one person would think that they've achieved it and another person would think that they have not. And that's how they realize that we actually need some objective measure of whether we achieved it or not. And yeah, you can, if you have a lot of time, you can do it.
Make the case for them,
yeah.
You're saying. Yeah, from our discussion before the presentation began, I thought back to when we implemented OKRs at my first startup. And when it was first implemented, I was like, oh, what a headache. And it took a while to get on board. And thinking back on it, I think the only reason it was successful, and again, this might be controversial, but this is an unfortunate belief I hold. It's a belief I wish I didn't hold, but I think is true. And that's when it comes to large-scale change like this, more often than not, it needs to be led from the top. So this wasn't the last question, but I think we might wrap up on this. In terms of organizational change, how often does this need to be, if we want to move towards a product-centric model, how often does it have to be led from the top? And do you believe that there's a case for it to be, bubbled up organically, grassroots in an organization? And maybe we go round robin.
Okay. I think it depends, as always. For something to be sustainable in a large organization, for example, in CBRE, you do need senior leadership commitment, and you do need that buy-in to be able to drive change that sticks, that doesn't get wiped out if something changes. However, from a grassroots bottom-up perspective, if you've got a band of people that are rebellious enough to all get together and say, right, we're going to do this, then absolutely. I think at the end of the day, something like OKRs, it's evidence. And as product managers, we're doing our best job when we can talk with the numbers, as Hannah said, align to the numbers, align to the evidence. Whether you put, a name of OKRs on top of it, or it doesn't matter what you call it, but it's all about evidence and setting some hypothesis about what you're going to achieve, what you're doing. So you can, I think at the beginning, each of us can do something from our small corner of the world if we're persistent enough and if we believe in it. That's what I believe anyway.
Okay, so that's a ray of hope from Hillary. Hannah?
I think the leader doesn't necessarily have to understand product, but I think if the leader of an organization doesn't understand that a customer is important, then you're probably onto a loser. If the most important thing to them is a really big parking space and a corner office, and they don't understand, what we're giving to the customer and how we're getting value from that customer and why that customer is paying us, then I think that would be a very hard person to persuade. Obviously, if there's a lot of layers in between you and them, then, as you say, in your corner that's somewhere completely different in an entirely different office with a much smaller parking space, then I'm sure that you can create your own kind of mini environment there that probably gives you what you need from product-centric thinking.
I think I'm going to say that was a half vote. You basically said it should be led from the top, but if you can carve out your own fiefdom,
yeah, if you can get far away enough that nobody sees what you're doing, then it's absolutely fine.
Stay at home.
Yeah.
Bring us home.
I didn't want to end on a pessimistic note, but yeah, my initial reaction was that it's impossible without senior leadership buy-in. But then, if we try to bring back optimism, I think it's more possible usually to get senior leadership buy-in than is usually believed. So you can actually talk to them, you can, again, bring them the evidence, and then you can get buy-in from someone, and then you can start leading the change to that.
I love that, right? It's like, okay, if you need the senior leadership buy-in, get it, and keep working at it till you get it. And if you can't, leave. Go somewhere where you can get it.
Or wait 18 months, because in certain organizations, they always shuffle around anyway, so.
All right. Thank you guys so much for presenting today. I really, really, really appreciate it. I think you guys appreciated it as well. Yeah? We did? Okay, we got beers outside. I think we're good for another half an hour until the venue's going to kick us out. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe the venue doesn't kick us out. But there are beers outside. Bathrooms are that way when you've left the exit. And I think we're good.